Hello and welcome to the Superwoman Life. Today my guest is Susie Mackie. She is an amazing woman. She's a photographer, an author and founder of the Women of Spirit movement. She's an advocate for women and well-being, and she's just incredible. Susie has released 2 volumes of stories all about the most amazing women. I blush slightly at that bit because I'm actually in one of them. So Susie, thank you so much for agreeing to come and talk to me today.
My absolute
Tell
pleasure.
everybody a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Yes, I certainly can. Oh, well, we have just said actually that, what did I say? My personal journey has become my professional life. And that sort of says it in a nutshell. I grew up with a very low self-worth for a number of reasons, which we don't need to go into detail here. It just as was. And so it wasn't until 2 years ago, at the age of 60, that I really found my value within myself, my worth, believed and knew my value and my worth. And those two things are different. We can believe it, but I think knowing it is far more powerful. I grew boundaries. I didn't have any boundaries for such a long time, so I allowed my fundamental niceness to be used and abused to varying degrees, physically, emotionally, mentally. And so it has been quite a journey, but no regrets, because I am now deeply ingrained in my passion, my purpose, and my why, which is helping other people know and believe in their value and their worth. And so, better late than never. Actually, we I don't want to say oldies, because actually I feel younger and more vibrant than I did when I was in my 20s, 30s, even 40s. Well, in fact, and 50, because the challenges that I faced made me quite ill. And that's another thing. I think when you are challenged with adversity, you can't be, it can make you very ill, but also you're not the real you. And I'm a bubbly, fun-loving person, and I simply didn't have the energy for that. So to get you back, or to become the you that you really are, you just got to find it. And so yeah, that's brought me my passion and my purpose. And having been married 3 times to men who had either controlling or dysfunctional personalities or addictive personalities was interesting, to say the least. My only regret about that is the effect that it had on my children. And so the reason why I want to help other people, it's not just women, although the books are full of women's stories. Men need our help too. And the reason for that is because if we can help with what we're all doing in the Women of Spirit movement, including UK, because also every woman of spirit and what she does in her professional life separately, because you've all turned what was your pain into a profession in order to give back. And I am just so proud of all of that. Is that we can help women who are much younger and perhaps before they have their children. And so their children don't end up suffering because of the relationships that we women end up in. That there's a big important factor there, is to help younger women. Yeah.
It's really difficult, isn't it? I think, I look at my daughter now, she's 16. And
tender age.
Yeah. And that you want to teach them all these amazing things, but at the same time, that they've kind of got to learn it themselves. I think if somebody had pointed out to us the pitfalls that we were going to fall into, I think we probably wouldn't have sidestepped them. We'd probably still gone charging ahead, wouldn't we?
I think this is true, Kate. They've got to make their own mistakes. And yet, we all make mistakes. We're all flawed. None of us are perfect. But if we can go into adulthood and maturity and then the rest of our lives with that strong sense of self, with firm boundaries put in place and knowing our value. We're not going to make the kind of mistakes that have such a deep effect on our, on our relationships, on our health, on our finances, on where we live, on our children, all of these things. Life would have been very different for me had I known my worth and married a wonderful, kind, functioning man, and I'd had the beautiful home and the 4 children that I always wanted. And so I have 2 stunningly wonderful daughters now, 26 and 29. And whilst they've been through the mill, partly because of, me and the relationships I had, including their father, life could have been quite different, but we are so close, and what they do have is a wonderful capacity for compassion, kindness and love, as well as their own absolute gifts with what they bring to the world. So, and life is a lesson throughout, isn't it? Learning for life.
And I think, what you said about going into life knowing your own value and having that self-worth, for me is, gosh, it's so important. I, like you, I think, was very much a people pleaser when I was younger. Just wanted everybody to like me and for everybody else to be happy. And if that meant sacrificing myself a little bit, then that was okay, because I could cope with that, but I wanted everybody else to be okay.
Yes, yeah.
As women, that's kind of how we're conditioned to be for the most part. And actually, that light bulb moment when you realise that actually you're of more value to the world and you can help people more and give more when you're not prepared to self-sacrifice, it's huge, isn't it?
It is huge, and it's also very complex, and yet it should be so simple. There's that classic example of proper selfishness, which when I do talks, I ask people, do they understand what proper selfishness is? And being self-full, well, it's not selfish. And I talk about the art of indulgence, and the classic example of proper selfishness, which goes against particularly, I think, motherhood instinct, is when you're on the aeroplane and the oxygen masks come down, you are told to put your own on before that of your children. And of course, our natural instinct would be to help our children first. But the bottom line is we are no good to anybody else if we're no good to ourselves. And so that's where it all begins. And self-love sometimes is a step too far for many. When I've done workshops, I've even heard, I think self-love is arrogant. But it has to be the place that we find and where everything then stems from. Whether it is personal, whether it is professional, we have to come from that place. And it's hard for women particularly, and maybe even it's a cultural thing. Maybe British women struggle with that more, for instance, than American women, or the serenity and the calmness and the meditative wisdom of Eastern women, who look inside far, far more. And maybe the American women are far more, out there with, I'm just fabulous kind of thing. And they're not afraid to express themselves. And so maybe it's that sort of stiff upper lip thing. I don't know, but there's a lot of work to do. And of course, it's not just, I know this is going out, this is for women, but we women have, maybe fathers, husbands, partners, sons, brothers. Men are struggling too, and probably more than we are. Looking at the suicide rates, looking at how they come off worse after a divorce. And I think the 2 fundamental points of that to watch out for are that they don't have the support system where we women go and to each other quite openly, and also they still believe that they are the providers, we are the nurturers, they're the providers. But also they still believe that showing emotion is a no-no. And so they hold it all in, and then what happens? They cannot go on any longer. And so, yeah, it's a big challenge. And I think lockdown, like everything in life, has produced massive polarized views of what it's done to us or for us or even with us. How did you fare over lockdown?
Do you know, we absolutely thrived, which, I actually feel quite guilty about it because I know how many people have really struggled. But for us as a family, it's been amazing because my daughter Laura was about to do her GCSEs. She'd worked incredibly hard for 3 years, but the stress was really starting to get to her, and she was feeling the pressure from school, and she was putting on herself to a large extent as well. So, of course, when the exams were cancelled, it was like having a different child in the house. It was amazing. And it really brought us together. I think I was very conscious that I wanted it to be a positive experience. So when we had, in the end, I had a day between them announcing the schools closing and them being at home because the schools ended up closing a bit early around here because there was a suspected case. But I spent that day really thinking about what I could do to make it more memorable and a positive time. So we had little rituals that we stuck to every day, and we had foods that we wouldn't necessarily have in the house so that it felt like a treat, and we did all that and kind of nurtured ourselves through it, I think.
Yes, to nurture yourselves. I think that I spoke earlier about the art of indulgence, and I asked people how do they indulge themselves, and it's proper, again, the word to indulge means in the dictionary to allow oneself to enjoy the pleasure of. And I love that. There's nothing wrong in doing that. What's wrong in allowing ourselves to enjoy the pleasure of? And of course, overindulgence, isn't necessarily a good thing, but to indulge is not a guilty thing at all. And so I love that. And it's part of nurturing, which is part of self-love. And so maybe some people don't realize how important it is to just let go and indulge, and sometimes to say, F it, I'm not doing this today. I'm not pushing myself to do this today. My body is screaming at me to tell me to stop. My body had to scream very loudly at me to tell me to stop. In 2000, I was diagnosed with ME. And 5 years ago, I ended up with fibromyalgia. And because I drive myself, and I'm far, far better now. I have found a wonderful company who does fantastic nutrition, which has changed my life, skincare. That's why I'm an advocate for well-being, because to go back to what I said earlier, and unless you are feeling well, you can't be you. It takes away the you. It takes away the spirit, which brings us nicely on to Women of Spirit and the movement that I founded several years ago. And yes, my darling, your story in the first book, I'll never forget when you wrote to me when I put some feelers out for, do you have a story to share? Well, of course, we all have a story to share. And some people were ready to share their stories. And your story was quite extraordinary, as all the women's stories are. And what is so beautiful is that the determination to find a way to survive and then to thrive is inspirational and enlightening. And that's where I just got so excited about the value of storytelling, which, of course, human beings have been doing for thousands and thousands of years. It bypasses the defense mechanism. Even fictional stories make us more empathetic to others, perhaps from different culture, religion, race, beliefs, or whatever. A little bit more tolerant, perhaps. And so the stories are incredibly important. And as is the movement, because whether we are going to go, back into another lockdown or not, this is a new way of connecting and supporting each other by doing it digitally. And so to bring what you're doing is fantastic, and I can't wait to do mine, because we're bringing visual and audible inspiration and enlightenment and support to people who need it. And also, but stories are fascinating anyway. We all have an element of nosiness, and we love, take reality TV, for instance. That's hugely popular. And some people find it very helpful. I may be on a TV series next year all about my boudoir photography. Yes, so because that's how I started out, really, as a photographer. So I did all the portraits for the Two Women of Spirit books, which was a joy, because to go back to the word spirit, which means the vital animating essence of a person, you all wrote your stories in the first person, which was, without exception, I've heard from you all, hugely cathartic. A difficult birth sometimes. 2 people say, Susie, I've written my story, I'm so glad I did, but it's my story and I need to own it. I'm not ready to share it yet, but they, found it so helpful. And the animating essence is what I aim to capture with somebody's portrait, whether it's a profile business portrait or whether it's what they do as business showcasing with storytelling images. I did a showcase for a joiner the other day in his workshop, and it was just like being in a sweetie shop for me, because I see things everywhere that will just tell a story. His tools, the bits of wood shavings, you can turn them into a story in an image and then a series of stories. But also, I invite women to come and do body confidence photo shoots with me, and men. I do men actually as well, which could be described as boudoir or doudoir. But I think because my specialty, is that an American word? I specialize in with a more mature person, say sort of 40 plus. So it's not pin-up or glamour. It's very, very much about the person within. And that's why my clients can tell me they found it life-changing. Or sometimes I have to reach for the box of tissues for them, because they begin to cry with relief at how they feel. They've just shed that awful anxiety and dislike and discontent of their body, and come to acceptance of the wobbly bits and, the bits they don't like, whether it's a breast that's been removed from cancer, or, whether they've been eating their feelings, or they just find a place where they can actually really love who they are and understand that this is just a body, and it's the internal beauty and sensuality, because we have a lot of fun and a lot of giggles, because we let that fun side and that slightly sexy side come out to play in a safe, non-judgmental environment. And that is my favourite thing to do for a person.
It's such a brave thing to do, isn't it, as well?
Well, look at you, my darling, with your shoot, and then your was it the full Monty?
Yeah, we haven't been able to do that yet.
I know, but you did the shoot, didn't you? Yeah. Fantastic.
That brings me on really nicely, actually, because one of the questions that I like to ask everybody is what you feel a hero is. What's a hero to you? And that, when you were telling me about the boudoir shoots, and I love the word doudoir, that's just brilliant. That to me takes an awful lot of strength and a lot of inner strength. And that's quite a heroic thing to me. But I'd love to know what you think a hero is.
I believe that a hero or heroine is somebody who firstly behaves with integrity as Oprah says, even when no one is watching. It is just inherent in who they are, and who is absolutely willing to step out of their comfort zone in order to help somebody else step out of theirs. And that's what all you women of spirit, there are 50 of you in the first 2 books, that every single one of you did that. That's what a heroine is. If you are willing to turn your pain into a profession in order to give back and help others, that's a heroine. It's because you did it through sheer strength of character, and you were not going to stay down there. And there are many people out there, I mean, and I'm not knocking celebrities or famous people, all of whom have got to where they are because they are gifted or talented, they've worked jolly hard, or they've just put themselves out there in some ways that we may not feel is necessarily the way we would be comfortable doing it. But they now have a great big entourage. They have, everything around them to support them, and that's great. That's a different kind of story. And I suppose when I very first started, this was the Women of Spirit was the second project I did with my photography degree. So I handed it in May 2005, just before my husband, my middle husband, the girl's father, and I were in Relate counselling. We'd been for a year at that time. And I handed my project in, Women of Spirit. Then I discovered that he'd been having an affair for the previous 6 months, not a very nice way, whilst we were in Relate counselling. And I had to phone him. He was working in London, and I had to phone him because I had an issue with a computer. And his mobile phone did a pocket answer. And it answered when his lover was getting into the car. And I heard the greeting, the kiss, and it was literally, now I knew then, that punched in the stomach moment. I was literally bent over double and could not breathe. So anyway, I went to get my results because college was also a sanctuary for me, which is another point that I would make to people. If you want to learn something new, it is never too late. Go do it. Go learn a new course. Do something. Make a change in your career if you are so unhappy with the one you have. And there's some links that Kate and I can put up after that. So I was a very mature student and probably gradually got less mature as the time went on because it was just fabulous. But my tutor came down. A 19-year-old Mikey was giving me a hug to support me because I was trembling. And my tutor came down and said, yeah, Susie, this could be a book. I got an A grade, and ultimately 3 years later I came away with a first because I was determined to do well. And so that gave me confidence that I could do something well, and I found my passion, which is to photograph people. It wasn't for another 12 years that I then was in the right place within me, and a divorce and another marriage and another divorce later, that I was in the best place to turn Women of Spirit into a book and search for people like you to take part, Kate, and even then be on the cover of book 1 with my power pick. It's the stories, you see, so you are my heroines. And I'll never forget at the launch of book 2, Sharon Lowe, who is a mindset coach, a success coach, and does global work with massive corporations. She came and spoke to support the launch of book 2, and she said something really powerful. And she said about how humbled she felt, not just because all the women had chosen to share their stories and get them out there in public, but because they would never know whose lives they would touch. They would never actually know who they would help, to what degree, by having shared their story. And so, and that made it really powerful for me. So, you know, my heroines are the ones who don't make a huge song and dance about it, but want to help and want to share and are brave enough to do something to make a difference.
I think it's so important, isn't it? And I think the thing that I loved about the Women of Spirit project is that it was everyday women. You know, there was nobody that anybody would have known unless, you know, you were a friend or a relative. It was women just going about their everyday lives. And part of the reason that I wanted to do this video series is because I absolutely believe that everybody, every single person that we meet, you know, unless they're a toddler or a small child, has had to overcome something that's meant that they've had to dig really deep. And it might not, in the scheme of their life, you know, if they're 12 years old, it might feel like a massive thing now. And by the time they're in their 40s, they might have completely forgotten about it. But everybody's had to do something in their life that's made them just go that little bit further than they were comfortable with. And to me, that's what it's all about. That's what being a hero is. And, you know, I think it's Joseph Campbell who said that, you know, we should be the hero of our own story. And we haven't got a choice, actually, have we? You know, you can't be the hero of somebody else's story because that's not relevant. You've got to take control of your life and live it to the best of your ability.
Yes, and you can't fix it for somebody else. That's what I went about in my relationships. You know, I thought, and I attracted men who were clearly, you know, needed fixing, but it wasn't my job to do it. And I think that you talked about toddlers. Well, actually, toddlers, look at all the pain they go through, learning to walk, falling down, getting up again. They would never hit their head on a table after one fall and say, well, I'm not doing that again. I think I'll stay down here. Thank you. You know, and in fact, as Sharon said in her talk, you don't get toddlers, you know, looking out of the window and saying, oh, God, it's raining. They say, let's go out and play, you know. And so it is just, and yes, all everyday women. I love that phrase. And we have to be the hero of our own lives. And in fact, the quote that I put, was it at the end of my story in the book, was by George Bernard Shaw, and The Road to Self-Love was Jerome K. Jerome. A new life begins for us every second. Let us go forward joyously to meet it. We must press on whether we will or no. And we shall walk better. I need my glasses on, Kate. We shall walk better with our eyes before us than with them ever cast behind. And the quote, I think, for me was George Bernard Shaw, and he said something which is very beautiful and meaningful. Life isn't about finding yourself. Life is about creating yourself. And I think this comes down to the choices we make and actually knowing that we have choices. I was brought up to be an obedient child. And I didn't know I had choices, because when you're a child, everything is so ingrained into you. And unless, you know, you're hungry to learn, or unless you know that something's not quite right, you know that you're not really happy, your life isn't joyful and abundant, you know, it's that thing of therapy. And again, in this country, we don't instantly go for, oh, I need some therapy, I need some help. If we have a mental or emotional issue, you know, we wouldn't hesitate to rush to the doctor if it was something physical. So why, if we're hurting inside, why wouldn't we go and get some help for that? So we can choose to stay embroiled and embittered or unhappy, or we can choose to get some help, accept help, because that's that law of receptivity, giving and receiving. You can't give without receiving, you can't receive without giving. And I spent my whole life being a giver, give, and that wasn't great. And so learning for life, just don't ever stop, and it is never too late. And I'm living proof of that. It's never too late. And you get younger, the happier you become, the younger you become, and the more you appreciate the loveliness that's around you, and that frees you up from anxiety by living in the present. That doesn't mean to say you don't have, shitty days and you feel a bit meh, or if one of your children is hurting, because that hurt, you're not going to be joyful and abundant when you know that a loved one is in pain because you want to help them. But the trick is that you stay strong. You don't go down there with them. You stay strong so that you can be in a place where you can be effective in helping them.
And if that means stepping away for a little while and going and having a bath or going for a walk or whatever it is, so that you've got time to collect yourself and then go back to them with that fresh energy and that, that renewed perspective. I think that's very important.
Just going to say a clear perspective. And about a note about pain, Kate, it's when stories started coming in for book 1, like yours, and I thought, oh my God, I haven't been through anything, because I started to compare. Number 1, we must not compare ourselves to others. Number 2, you cannot measure pain. You can't. I was with Anna King on BBC Radio Gloucestershire quite some time ago, and I was talking about this. You cannot measure your pain against somebody else's pain just because you feel that they've been through far more trauma or adversity. Your pain is your pain, and it jolly well hurt at the time. So don't dismiss or diminish that.
We look at what we've been through and we coped with that. So we figure if we managed to cope with it, it couldn't have been as bad as somebody else has had it. And I think because it's a new situation and it's maybe something that we haven't experienced ourselves, then we automatically assume that we wouldn't have been able to cope with that. If it was me, I wouldn't have got through what you've got through. We're trained almost to think that, if we've managed to cope with it, then it must have been lesser than somebody else. It's interesting, isn't it?
And speaking about coping, people used to say, I don't know how you cope. How do you cope? Well, the bottom line is you just do, because what's the alternative? I actually said sink or swim, and I am not going to sink, because what's that alternative? And it can be so hard, and but that's why you and we are nearer the top of the mountain, or in fact, I feel like I'm walking on level ground now, and I'm in the best place I've ever been at 62, and I feel that I've got a lot to offer. And I have the energy to offer it because I've looked after myself, and so bring it on.
That's wonderful, isn't it? So you mentioned that the women in the books, and obviously a lot of women that you've come into contact with, you would class as your heroes. But is there anybody else? It could be somebody fictional, it could be a family member, a friend. Is there anybody else that you really look up to and see as a real inspiration, a real hero to you?
For inspiration and being heroes, because again they impart their wisdom so beautifully, and they're already right out there. I would say Brené Brown. She has given me such light bulb moments by watching her, and also comfort, because she's like me, she's heart on her sleeve and not afraid to share her moments or her weaknesses or her challenges. but with such wisdom and so funny. Of course, Oprah and Maya Angelou, those people who, my God, went through, and nothing has stopped them from, and as Maya Angelou would say, and then I rise. And actually, there's that lovely phrase, a rising tide raises all ships. And that's what we are, Kate, So those people, for well-known people, come to mind immediately. I do have a fantasy dinner party list. I'm trying to think of some now. And also there are men on my hero list as well. And so, but I'd have to think about that. So those two would come to mind immediately because they're kind of in my sphere. I was introduced to Sir Ken Robinson via YouTube a couple of weeks ago because he just died. And I was blown away by his wisdom, his intelligence around education and his delivery, and of course he had polio and all of these things. So he would certainly, it's quite a fun thing to do, to write down your fantasy dinner party list, because they can be dead or alive or whatever, and those would probably be my heroes and heroines. So I think it's definitely people who are not afraid to speak their truth.
Ken Robinson's been a hero of mine for a long time because, as you know, I used to be a teacher, so I've always sort of kept one toe in education, and I do a lot of work with my Karma Classroom stuff as well. And he was just an incredible man. Yeah, I've lost count of how many times I've watched his TED Talk and read his books, because he just understands what it takes to learn, and it doesn't matter whether you're an adult or a child. He just completely understood. And when I found out that he died the other week, I almost grieved as if I would for a family member. I feel like people like him and Brené Brown, and Oprah and all those people who are out there and advocating for such positive things, they're the people that we need in the world. And with everything that's going on at the minute and the way schools are having to adapt to cope with the new measures and things, I just think he would have been such a force for good.
And I'd never heard of him, so I was so thankful to be introduced to him. I think also so important, we've got these people who are advocates, and they've got the listening ear, they have the audience, but I also have massive respect and admiration, and these people are real heroes. And I can't remember the name, so I'll look it up, but Susie Rose will know it, because I know that I posted about something the other day. And this is about the people who kind of work undercover with things, for instance, like sex trafficking, and who put themselves in massive danger to infiltrate the rings for this, because for me, sexual abuse, rape, sex trafficking, any form of grooming is the most heinous crime. And I just find it super evil. And there is a man, I posted a while about this man in America, and he's fostered a whole bunch of them, he and his wife, but he goes in and he does incredible things. And so those people who we have no idea what they're doing right this very moment to help children. And also there's those gorgeous guys or people like the barber who goes around giving homeless people haircuts, and the value that for themselves that he gives them. With a simple haircut and beard, shave or trim, and they look in the mirror and they cry because, somebody's done that, and they kind of can see themselves where they got lost in. I just find people who do that. There's another pair of young guys, are they American or British, who go around they're decorators, and for every house they decorate, they go and do a teenager's room for free, and sort of give it a makeover as a surprise. A teenager who's maybe struggling, or maybe and they do that. And they are superheroes to me because they're unsung.
Yeah. And there are so many, aren't there? I mean, obviously, you come across people depending on where your life takes you. I've come across so many social workers and teachers and, people who wouldn't even realise that what they were doing was something special and out of the ordinary. The teachers who take extra food to school because they know there are children in their class that haven't got any dinner. And, I've got friends who, ask for my son's school shoes when he's grown out of them because they know there are children in their class that don't have new shoes, and things like that can have more of an impact on your life.
Oh, yeah, because it's society, the masses, who are simply just trying to get on with it. So it's heroes with humility, I think, are the ones. But there's also George Michael. His music and Elton John's saw me through all my trials and tribulations. But the power of music for me is extraordinary. When George Michael died, I was just so sad because his music, but also his life and what he did for people with his charity, but also just giving spontaneously was such a beautiful thing. And he didn't want anybody to know about it. It all came out after he died, and I loved that. But here, the people who, like those two, who keep on giving their gift to the world whilst they are actually going through such emotional or mental pain, and then it's not until later that you learn about it. Rocket Man is one of my favourite films, and I cried when he, as an adult, came face to face with himself as a child, and they held. Oh,
it was so powerful, wasn't it? Mm. It's interesting because I went to see Rocket Man at the cinema with my husband because he's a big fan. Obviously, he loves his music, full stop. But I was never really that bothered about Elton John. I didn't grow up with him. I think because of the age that I am, I kind of missed his heyday and came in at the wrong time. And looking back now, I actually quite like a lot of his earlier stuff, but the stuff that I grew up listening to, I wasn't as bothered about. But I was the same. I sobbed in Rocket Man because it was just so powerful and it was so beautifully put together.
Oh, incredible. So if anybody watching hasn't seen it, just find a way to see it.
It's fabulous. So, Susie, my last question for you.
Yes.
This is going to be a bit of a challenge for you, I think. What would you say is your superpower?
Thanks, Kate. Oh, my superpower that comes from within me, nothing to do with my learned powers of photography, where I am told I shoot from the heart. I think my superpower is my openness. Just by being open, I am told that I am an inspiration and that it changes lives. I'm not afraid to share. I'm not afraid to speak up. So I think my superpower is my openness and honesty, which can sometimes get me into trouble, but not with tactlessness, but just maybe oversharing or whatever. But that's just me, and I've owned it. So I think that would be my superpower, is my ability to inspire through being open and honest and
yeah, that's definitely true. And I think
is that a superpower?
Yes, definitely. I think what you said about your photography was really interesting as well, because I've experienced it firsthand because I was lucky enough for you to take my picture, but it's so true what you said. You take photos from your heart, but you capture the essence of the person that you're taking. They're not snapshots. They're not, they're not posed photos, although they can be, but you manage to catch the essence of the person as well as the physical. Yeah.
And that's the same whether it's a business profile portrait or it's a body confidence / boudoir and beauty shoot, because it has to come from deep within. That's what shows in the eyes. And so I'm very careful to say this is me. My camera is an inanimate object, because so many of us are uncomfortable in front of the camera. And so I say, look, this is just a tool. I'm taking your pictures, so we connect and we relate and we collaborate and we have fun, and that's where, somebody said to me, you really shoot from the heart. And I think that's because I love people and I love working with people and I love helping them feel better about themselves, and that just encompasses me. I think I want to help people feel better about themselves.
And it all ties together with the openness and the honesty as well, doesn't it, of course? Because I think because you're so open and you're so caring in your approach to your work, people instinctively feel at ease when they're around you, and then you get to see that side of them. Definitely a superpower.
Thank you, my darling.
Thank you so much.
Oh, I've loved it. Thank you. It's been an absolute joy and a privilege, and carry on with this because it's just wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate.
Would you just like to take a moment to tell people where they can find you if they want to find you online?
Yes, thank you. Well, the Women of Spirit website is womenofspirit.co.uk, and via that website you can go click on the books. There's pictures of the books. You can just click on them to go straight to Amazon and buy the books on either Kindle or paperback there. You can also submit, if you have a story to share, then please do. They are held in the strictest confidence, and that's just a beginning. The other thing I would say about sharing stories, if you then write your story and you say, actually, Susie, I've written it, I feel I need to own it, I'm not ready to share it yet, that is treated with the greatest of respect and it is not shared. And so for my business and sort of for the boudoir and all of that, the photography element, my details would really be from susiemackie.com, which currently is more of a wedding and portrait website, but I'm coming away from doing weddings now, and so I'm focusing on the body confidence shoots, but I also give free Zoom presentations. So Kate, I have a follow-up PDF which, if you want to share, because that's got click links to all sorts of things which people can then look at their leisure.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll send that to you.
Amazing.
Thank you.